everybody please be seated? We need to get going. We're going to begin with a public testimony on this item. For that, I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Perez. We have a lot of folks wishing to speak. Vice President?
We have a lot of folks wishing to speak today on behalf of this issue, and I would ask everyone to ensure that we have enough time to respect the 3-minute limit as you come up. The first person is Carl Freelander, Community College Council, CFT.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I'm a union president, so I haven't been deeply involved in the discussions, but what I wanted to assure the board is that I've heard you commend, and rightly so, the leadership of the statewide academic senate for the work they've done on the prerequisite issue. I've had the opportunity, by attending their executive committee meetings and also attending their session this fall, to see the very impressive engagement of faculty leaders in the Senate from across the state in the very thoughtful vetting of all of the very complex issues involved in the decision to introduce this change in our prerequisite system. And I really wanted to commend them. I think it's been, you're hearing in the presentation of the Senate the voice of our faculty across the state on this recommendation, and it's been very well done. There will always be individual faculty members across the state who have different ideas about things. That's the nature of faculty, but in terms of really an authoritative and thoughtful processing of the issues, the reason the presentations are so good is because all of the work that has gone on for a long time now in carefully analyzing this. I was there as a Senate president in the early 90s when we first, the rules came in, and actually at the time I welcomed them, the rules that really limited our ability to put in these prerequisites. But I think it's been pretty clear that it has created a set of problems which has been identified by Nancy Shulock and others in terms of its effect on our completion rates in our classes. And I do think that this is a excellent recommendation that you're getting from the Senate, and hope that the board at your next meeting will support it. Thank you.
Next person is Paul Steenhausen from the LAO.
Thank you. Paul Steenhausen with the Legislative Analyst Office. We're the nonpartisan advisory arm of the legislature. I spoke on this issue back in September at your board meeting in the Capitol. Just a reminder, our office supports this change. It would allow colleges and faculty to, among other things, better communicate to students the competencies that are required to succeed in college-level coursework. It would increase incentives for students to get assessed, which is a problem now, and also for underprepared students to address their basic skills deficiencies as soon as possible. And it would also increase the standards and the quality of certain college-level coursework, the courses that have these prerequisites. It would ensure that the seats are filled by students who have the appropriate foundation in math and English. We've, like others, been very impressed with the level of discussion, debate, and the level of oversight and controls contained in this proposal. Thank you.
Nancy Shulock with California State University, Sacramento.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly. I want to emphasize 3 points that I made in the written statement that I submitted to you last July. First, I think it's very clear that both sides in this debate care deeply about student success. Each side believes the other side's preferred policy will harm underrepresented students. Secondly, this debate cannot be resolved on the basis of data. And I know we're supposed to be data-driven these days, but I really believe that we're looking for answers in data that are not there, and here's why. National research on the value of developmental education is inconclusive. Some studies find that it helps, some studies find that it doesn't help. There are huge data problems and methods problems that prevent conclusive answers. But more importantly, even if we could conclusively prove that it didn't help, would that be because remediation is a bad idea or because we don't do it as well as we could do it? We cannot know from the available data. The other data issue is closer to home. It's our own data that some of you cited earlier before the break. Research findings from our own system about the success that underprepared students have in GE courses is also mixed, and it's also fraught with data problems. But again, more importantly, some underprepared students pass GE courses because they find other ways to master college-level skills, or because course standards have been lowered to allow students to pass without college-level skills. We cannot know from the data. So my third point is, while we can't find the answers in data, I believe that we can find the answers in common sense. Curriculum is not some fixed physical law of nature that we have to validate through statistics. It's designed by humans. Does it make sense to design general education courses so that students who lack college reading, writing, and math skills can pass them? Does it make sense to support a status quo in which Latino students transfer at 1/2 the rate of white students? Does it make sense to send messages to high school students that it doesn't matter how they do in high school, because if they are just going to community college, then a lack of college readiness won't matter. They can still take college courses. Does it make sense, as colleges start working with CSU to develop transfer degrees, to publicize college data showing that 60% of students pass GE courses without passing an English course? Does it make sense to conclude that since our basic skills haven't been working as well as we would like in the past, that they can't work, even with the promising reforms underway that could improve learning and reduce the time that students spend in basic skills? So I think we're making things too complicated. No other state, as Jane said, places so many obstacles in the way of faculty to set prerequisites. What the leading states are doing is giving colleges more flexibility to find ways to help students complete their remediation more quickly. They're not turning away from remediation. They're working to make it better so students can get through effectively and quickly. Their reforms begin from the premise that underprepared students need to get prepared. Content review is one tool they rely on to determine if and where students are underprepared and to find the best way forward for those students. Thank you. I'm leaving a copy of the written.
Aidan Healy, President-elect, Matrix Professionals Association.
Thank you. Aidan Healy, President-elect of the Matriculation Professionals Association. We are in agreement that setting prerequisites and placing students into classes consistent with their skills and ability will increase the probability of success for students having the skills to get into those classes. However, we are concerned about unintentional consequences arising from overly rapid and potentially excessive expansion of the proposed practice. Although being proposed as a permissive option, our first and broadest recommendation is that the use of content review as proposed be implemented on a more limited pilot basis for a period of 3 years in order to provide for a more thorough evidence-based analysis of the benefits as well as the unanticipated consequences potentially resulting from the use and/or expanded application of this methodology. We have 3 areas of concern. First, data that shows 70 to 80% of community college students test at below college level English and math skills is alarming. In addition to appropriately placing prepared students, assessment will also inevitably sort out those less well prepared. Will there be sufficient resources available for them to succeed? There is not now. Our concern is that assurances made in district plans for course alternatives may be qualified contingent on future funding. The gap created by rapidly adding prerequisites and delaying the provision of alternative courses could have devastating consequences for hundreds of thousands of community college students. Districts have the information necessary to calculate the extent to which new courses or sections will be needed and should do so as part of their planning process. Furthermore, new prerequisite courses should only be implemented at a pace that can be offset by the provision of sufficient alternate courses to counterbalance that calculated impact. We are also concerned that what may be perceived as acceptable impact at the local level might well be far more significant when aggregated statewide. Secondly, we have concern for disproportionate impact on access. The proposed changes require that a district monitor progress on student equity by conducting an evaluation to determine the impact on student success and whether we believe that, certain groups are disproportionately impacted. We believe that in addition to the impact on student success, districts should also be required to consider the potential for disproportionate impact on student access. If district data reveal that access of underrepresented students would be significantly impacted by setting new prerequisites, such action might frustrate the accomplishment of other district or statewide priorities, such as closing the achievement gap. Finally, a more simplified method for setting prerequisites may significantly expand the number of courses doing so. Increasing prerequisites increases the need for assessment and all related costs. This is a cost which can be calculated and should be accounted for during district planning. Also, more prerequisites will result in more student challenges, which, by the way, have a 5-day turnaround time. English and math faculty should be fully informed and prepared to take on this additional workload. Our recommendations are included in the paper that I've submitted, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Ross Romero from Los Amigos in LULAC.
My name is Ross Romero. I'm from Los Amigos and LULAC. I'm a high school dropout who worked in a factory for a year and a half, went on to Cypress Community College, afterwards to the University of California, Irvine, in which I graduated, and later on to Hastings College of the Law. And I like to preface it with that because I am a product of the community college system. And I am a product of the come one, come all concept. And earlier in the meeting, that was discussed, and I was glad to hear that, because I went into the website and researched it, and that still is pretty much the foundation of our system here. But I do see that much of what's going on is calling that into question. I would like to state that this policy that's being proposed effectively will lead to the exclusion and denial of students. And that's why we're here. That's why we're concerned. It will also serve as a deterrent. Many students will look at these prerequisites and they're not even want to go for it. And I think we have to stick with that philosophy. We got to have trust in our young people that they're willing to meet the challenge. It was talked about Governor Brown and the budget. And I have to interpret some of his actions as, once again, the fact that he understands this original concept of come one, come all. He gets it. I'm glad to see that, yeah, Governor Brown, you get it. We're going to give you the money, but we need to put some limitations there because maybe he doesn't like what he's seen is happening with our community college system. And maybe he understands the role of the community college system, particularly now that we have so much pressure being put on from the upper levels at the UC and the Cal State. We're in a crisis situation with our young people. They have nowhere to go. And so, yeah, that is your role. And here you stand to say that you want to take preclusionary steps. From a community perspective, I'm also, I'm very disheartened to see that the teachers who are pushing this policy, that once again, the Chicano Latino community is standing on the other side of the table from teachers. That seems to be happening quite a bit in this state. And it really disheartens me to see that we're sitting across the table from teachers' interests and those interests of the community, of the Chicano Latino community and their students in this state. You might have your fancy approaches, content review, whatever, probability, but the way we see it is that there still is a large opportunity in practice. In practice, there's a large opportunity for exclusion and denial. That was the basis of the lawsuit that occurred. And we can see that in our county where there's 3 districts that are varying in their policies of how they handle undocumented students. My time is getting up here, I guess, but I think one of the other things is that we really would just like to see we kind of have to view it as a part of the faculty. Maybe they're not committed as much to this idea of come one, come all. And one last question I had, I understand that a lot of money is coming down money has come down from the federal government by way of the stimulus package directly to the community colleges. I know that maybe that money was minimal, but perhaps we have the hope that more money will be coming in the future. And
Mr.
maybe
Romero.
Governor Brown understands that. I have a lot of faith in Governor Jerry Brown. Let me just say that. He's taking your money away, and I know that was a big discussion. I know for all of us it's something hard to chew on, but just let me say I have a lot of faith that that money and hopefully our state will restore the funds, because that's really what it all comes
Mr.
down
Romero,
to.
I have to ask you to conclude your comments.
Thank you.
Very much. Eloy Oakley from the Long Beach City College.
Good morning, everyone. Eloy Oakley, President of Long Beach City College and Board of Governors groupie. This will be an interesting juxtaposition from the last speaker, but I am also a product of the California Community College system. I'm also a Latino, reentry student, and I'm here to support the Academic Senate's work and the proposal for prerequisites. But let me preface my comments that I support it with a number of caveats. First of all, I've heard a lot of comments today about unintended consequences. And quite frankly, I'm tired of talking about unintended consequences, and it's time to talk about the consequences of the current system. When only 18% of Latinos are transferring in 6 years in this system, we must consider what is wrong now and what the consequences are now of not doing anything different. We must have the courage to move forward quickly and vigorously to begin to change the way we operate in California, because the time is now. These students need an opportunity to continue on to their higher education, or their future is gone. Their future is gone in this economy if we cannot begin to move them forward. This is one piece to that puzzle. And I would ask the board, as you consider looking at data, and I really appreciate Vice President Perez's comments, because they're the kinds of deep questions that need to begin to be asked. Questions must be asked. Why are our students not succeeding? And there are many reasons for that. But we must begin to address those step at a time within a context of an overall strategy. And I know Chancellor Scott and his task force are moving forward with that, and we must continue to push forward to get all of these pieces in place and continue to look at the data for our system and disaggregate that data to see where our African Americans are doing, where are they going, where are the Latinos going, and really begin to push our system to move forward, to work with our faculty, to work with our administrators, to work with our students to understand what needs to be done and have the courage to do that as quickly as possible, and then measure the results. And if those results are not providing the outcomes that our students deserve, then we must continue to look at other changes that we must make until we get to those outcomes. So I appreciate your time. And again, I support Jane and the Academic Senate and their work. I think it's a great step forward, and we must encourage the faculty to continue to look for ways to move our students forward and to continue to change our curriculum to adapt to their needs. So thank you.
Sandhya Jonah, Los Amigos.
Good morning, board members, Chancellor Scott, members, and the rest of the audience. I am Sandhya Jonah. I'm here this morning representing Los Amigos of Orange County to address the proposed prerequisite policy changes and the resolution. At the November 9th, 2010 Board of Governors meeting, we presented a public statement regarding the proposed resolution and expressed our number of concerns, which we strongly believe need to be considered by the board to ensure that the right decision is made relative to the direction of how to best provide an accessible and equitable curricular process for underprepared students in the California community colleges. We continue to have the same concerns and would like to remind you what they were at that time. An analysis of the proposed resolution revealed that it lacks clarity and needs to include research and evidence for the benefit of reliability and validation. Additionally, the inclusion of permissive language will create confusion and havoc for the students, which may force students to enroll outside of their local district area. This may cause a financial burden on a financially needy student, plus create an atmosphere of island hopping, that is, moving from one school to another. Although the proposal resolution has moved by a consultative council, there is a serious concern about the lack of transparency and ineffective communication throughout the community college system. We conducted an informal survey and contacted board members, faculty, students, administrators, and staff to get their perspective about the proposed resolution, and over 95% of them were unaware of the proposed resolution. We found that a result to be very disturbing given the magnitude of the potential impact. When we ask the high-level institutional stakeholders the question, how will the proposed resolution affect your college if it is approved and implemented? Common response was, it will create a significant loss of revenue and change the mission of the college. This too is very disturbing, and we strongly encourage caution. There's another issue which has to be considered, as we strongly believe it has broader ramifications. The achievement academic gap for African American and Chicano Latino students has to be one of the highest priorities to be considered by all stakeholders in the California colleges. We believe there is a collective delusion that by addressing prerequisites, the achievement academic gap will be resolved. Again, we find this very disturbing, as we have found through our research efforts that the gap issue is not a one-factor issue. We from Los Amigos want to make it very clear that we recognize the challenges faced by all in public education, but we also want to acknowledge the great leaders are those who are well informed. We believe you, the board members, will make every effort toward that end, and thank you for your time.
John Ayala with Los Amigos, Orange County.
Good morning, board members, Chancellor Scott, staff members, and members of the audience. My name is John Ayala. I'm a product of the community college system, Long Beach City College. I also was the faculty senate president of Long Beach City College for 2 years. I'm a retired dean from Fullerton College, and I'm a member of the Los Amigos Education Committee. At the November 9th, 2010 Board of Governors meeting, we presented a public statement regarding the proposed resolution, expressed a number of concerns which we strongly believe need to be considered by the Board of Governors. These concerns are directly related to how best provide an accessible and equitable curricular process for underprepared students in the California community colleges. In addition, we are concerned that the resolution as presented drafted will result in detrimental effect on minority students, resulting on denying them entrance and acceptance to selected community college classes. We continue to have the same concerns, but given the new revision recently submitted, our concerns have increased. I would like to acknowledge that Dr. Scott, Dr. Russell, and Vice Chancellor Garcia have been attentive in meeting with us and others to address our concerns. We welcome their willingness to entertain our input from community stakeholders. Recently, via Dr. Russell's efforts, we submitted feedback with relevant questions and concerns regarding the revised resolution, and the FAQs included. Our expectations are that our inputs will be considered and incorporated in the text of both documents. We are very aware of the California Community College's administrative process, and that the California State Legislature has assigned the academic faculty the responsibility to develop curricula through AB 1725. And I was a member of the Senate when we did that, so I understand that process very well. However, we continue to have major concerns with the proposed and new revised resolution. Specifically, our concerns are multiple, but can be best summarized by the following 5 areas. Number 1, the tone of the resolution is not student-centered and detracts from student success. The tone and language of the revised resolution responses in the FAQs are clearly not student-centered. The language reeks of elitism, and if approved without appropriate changes, will create a biased and arbitrary creaming effect. 2, The process for inclusion of inputs into the proposed regulations is not student or community attentive, leading to polarizing and politicizing the whole process. Documents emailed by Dr. Russell have been dated to conform with times, should have been dated to conform with timelines within the process. 3, the proposed regulations simply do not address the basis of the MALDEF suit, leading once again to repeating the same errors, yet expecting different results. The inclusion of exit tests without statistical validation safeguards will result in once again trapping students, the central issue in the 1988 lawsuit. Proposed bias language may and could have legal implications relative to courses which demonstrate a disproportionate impact. Stated differently, can a course which reflects such bias be taught? Number 4, the proposed resolution is a compendium of anecdotal opinions without the basis of sound research to substantiate recommendations. In effect, even when Dr. Shulock's words are quoted, her comments are also anecdotal opinions, which, since she also does not provide reference to sources giving validity to key statements and opinions.
Mr. Ayala, I need to ask you to conclude your comments, please.
Okay. In conclusion, we, the community stakeholders, strongly believe that the revised resolution without appropriate student-centered, student-friendly language will be harmful and discriminatory to specifically African American and Chicano Latino students at the community colleges. Thank you very much.
Zeke Hernandez, President, Santa Ana LULAC.
Thank you. My name is Zeke Hernandez. I'm president of Santa Ana LULAC. I want to talk to you in a very different perspective. Is that if you notice the minutes from the El Camino College meeting, noted that you had some speakers, and I want to say something that I don't know if that's the way we were addressing the group, but it seems like we were tilted to saying that we have concerns, et cetera, et cetera. I might state adamantly that we are opposed to the recommendations being brought to you by this body, and hopefully that you would consider our position on this and look at a different perspective on it. I want to mention that, or even to ask you a question, because I look at the process, the deliberative decision-making process that you have before you, and I think the plan was to have a public hearing in February, and yet you're having the first reading today. We held a public hearing sometime in mid 2010, and we provided the community as well as yourself an opportunity so that you can express your comments, your suggestions, your recommendations, your thoughts in terms of the recommended changes for Title V. We are prepared. In fact, we have before us, and I have an envelope here with several flash drives that we can provide you in terms of our documentation that we want to give to you, in addition to the video of that public hearing that we have. I would give this to Vice Chancellor Garcia and ask if, and we have several other ones if you wish now, but, and I'll be giving this to her in a couple minutes. If you need more, please do ask us, because we would encourage each board member, each board of governors member to view this, because it will give you a really good perspective in terms of the input that we received. At this public hearing, it was facilitated by Los Amigos, but we had individuals like the Chancellor of North Orange County Community College District there, Ned Daphne, providing comments, as well as the President of the Board of Trustees. We had input by Ms. Linda Collins, Executive Director of the Career Ladders, Dr. Regina Stambeck Stroud, and you all, I'm just going to give you names because of the time limitations here. Ms. Marlene Garcia, Vice Chancellor here, Dr. Rita Cepeda, Mr. John Acuna, who is a counselor, Dr. Jose Moreno, Associate Professor at Cal State University, Long Beach. In addition to having received input from Dr. Jane Patton, Dr. Richard Mahan, Ann Price, Ms. Jan Perry, and a number of questions that were received by the audience members. That's why we want you to look at this video so that you can get a different perspective in terms of a public hearing where input was soundly received by us, and we are forwarding to you so that you can understand our concerns. Not so much as just our concerns, but because our reasoning for our opposition to the recommendation that is before you now.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Hernandez.
much.
Irendira Aldana, sorry if I chopped your first name, Los Amigos of Orange County.
Chair. Hi, my name is Erendira, and I'm actually currently a student at Cal State Long Beach, and I'm here to read a testimonial from a student that attended Rancho Santiago Community College. The student's name is Paul Garcia, and it reads, I am a former and proud community college student from Santiago Canyon College. I transferred to UCLA in the fall of 2009. My testimony, I hope, will illuminate the essence of why the Board of Governors needs to reconsider the proposed policy resolution. In high school, I struggled academically and I did not have the drive and the confidence. While growing up, my parents frequently emphasized the importance of attaining a college education. But after high school, I confronted the daunting question, is college for me? I made the decision to enroll in a communications course to test the college environment in the summer of '06. The community college placement test results recommended that I start at Math 60, 2 levels below college. I started at English college level, and I have always had difficulty in math. I had to take 2 remedial math courses before I could take a college-level math course that was transferable. Then I took the transferable math course. I received a grade lower than a C the first time, and the second time I passed with an A. In addition, I switched my major twice and changed my educational plan. I do not consider myself a burden to the community college system. I was in the honor program. I took English and History honors courses and graduated with honors, twice received honors through academic semester, and was part of the Phi Theta Kappa International Honor Society. As I reflect on my 3 years it took to receive my Associate of Arts degree in Political Science, I wonder what could have been different to finish in 2 years. I went to tutoring sessions. The tutors may have been present, but it gets a little more complicated when the tutors hand specialize in certain areas. So for example, one tutor may focus on college statistics, another may focus on remedial math, and another on calculus. Therefore, the wait to ask a question is long if there is only one math tutor. I do recall the math lab being full there when I was present, and I went to tutoring weekly, and depending on the math session for the week, I went to tutoring sessions daily and even on Saturdays. In addition, I went to office hours and did my homework in the community college library. I took notes and asked questions, and outside of class, I reviewed my notes, read the chapters, and did the homework. If I had questions on a particular problem, I tried to work it out on my own, and if progress was made, I made a note of it. At the next class, depending if tutoring was available, I would ask for help at the math lab. If the peer tutor could not help, however, I went to class with my attempted work on paper, and usually, college math professors allowed for a few minutes for questions at the beginning of class. It took me a semester or 2 to devise this plan outlined above. I passed my second remedial course with this plan, but even with this strategy, I still received a grade lower than a C in my transferable math course. To capture my efforts, I was even complimented by professors who said that I was sincerely trying because they knew my work on paper showed an effort and my questions were thoughtful and specific. In spite of these challenges, I made it through community colleges with hard work and sacrifice. Maybe we need to consider all aspects, both inside and outside the classroom. How are tutoring services being formulated, and what is more funding needed? It took me 4 semesters to complete my math prerequisites and all transferable requirements, and the idea to add more prerequisites as a barrier for future community college students is of great concern to me.
Thank you. I had Ross Romero twice, but I believe he can only speak once, right? Okay. Francisco Barragan from United Mexican American Veterans Association.
Good morning. My name is Francisco Barragan. I'm the commander of United Mexican American Veterans Association, UMAVA, from Orange County. And I'm also here with a coalition from Los Amigos of Orange County. I'd like to offer a couple of perspectives. I am a product of the community colleges, and actually the decision you're about to make, it affects generations. For example, I came to the U.S. when I was 10 years old, and I had a lot of challenges. Mine were economic challenges, and so for me, the community college was very critical. It allowed me to, I'm the first one to go to college for my family, but the community college was so critical for me to do that. After that, a lot of my family, and it's also from the community college, my ex-wife, and my daughter's mom who's here too. My current wife started from the community college. My daughter's at community college. My stepson is at community college. Many of us in our family have been able to attain education and find the community college to be a pathway to education. So I know that we have significant issues on the on education itself, but you have to understand that there's a lot of impacts that come from different areas. And the other one that I want to talk about is, as a military veteran, when I came back from serving, I was in San Francisco. When I came back, I had to come back to Modesto, the Modesto area, Merced County area, Stanislaus area. And what I needed to know was that the community college was going to be consistent and reliable. I needed the community college to have high standards, but also needed to know that there was a consistency and reliability. And I'm sure that a lot of our veterans who are coming back are also looking for that. So there is a concern and a risk that when you try to put some of the control at the local level, you may lose that consistency and reliability that many of our returning veterans are looking for. So the other thing too is that, you know, we hope that you consider that before you make this major decision. For example, I come from the business side. I've been the chief audit executive for companies and serving as top consulting firms, but it was from my education that I was able to achieve that. But having that consistency, reliability is key. As a chief audit executive, we rely a lot on data. The data informs the professional judgment, and it validates that professional judgment. So that data is key. And if you're making a decision that's going to impact generations, I hope that you do consider the importance of the data and also the common sense. At the risk of simplifying, I'm going to say this. You know, I look at it's great to come up with alternatives, but perhaps the alternatives being proposed is not yet a great alternative. I'm going to simplify this. I look at it like wanting to education being like brand cereal. At my age, I need to eat a little bit more bran flakes. When you give me choices of more sugar cereals, they may not be good for me. See, so you need to come up with a different alternative. I hope you take the time to really perhaps do a pilot program like it's been suggested. Consider the data. Consider the impacts on the community, because we do need a lot of our students. We need the consistency, reliability that we know when we're going from that community college to higher education, that will exist there. When I transferred from community college to San Francisco State, I was actually able to start at the honors program at San Francisco State in accounting. And I attribute that to community college. So thank you for the work that you do, because what you touch touches generations, and I hope you do look at it with a little bit more time. Thank you.
Mark Venezuela, the Student Senate for California Community Colleges.
Good afternoon, board members, Chancellor Scott. I come to you today representing the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. We had a discussion on Sunday discussing this item, and after a little bit of discussion, we decided that we were in support of this. We shared some stories, and I'm going to share my story with you. I'm not very good in math. I tested into level before transfer level math, along with a bunch of other students. In that class, it was full, and I was one of the last people to be able to get that class. And so there was about 10 people on the wait list that came in and tried to crash the class as soon as the class started. The teacher wasn't able to accommodate them. It's a math class. They try and limit it to the cap in order to serve all students adequately. But what happened was halfway through the semester, about a week before the drop date, 10 people dropped out of that class because they weren't being successful in that class. Those 10 people took up spots that could have been taken by the 10 people at on the wait list that may have been prepared for that class and are on a transfer track. And so what happened was we lost those 10 spots that weren't allowed to be refilled because it was too late in the semester already. And so I think what happens if we don't have prerequisites for some of these programs, we're getting students who are underprepared. They may be almost ready to take that class, but they need a little extra guidance before they take that class. I'm really glad I took this class. I was able to pass it successfully, and I feel a little bit more confident in math. But I think some of these prerequisites are giving our students a chance to be successful for the first time in a subject they're not already successful in. And it builds a little bit of confidence before they move into that English or math class they need to transfer. And so we are in support of this because we think it more adequately serves our students that are trying to get through the system as quickly as possible, but it's also taking care of the students and making sure that they're prepared to move on their next adventure in a higher level math or a higher level English class. Thank you for your time.
Arnulfo Hernandez, Jr. From the American GI Forum.
Mr. Chancellor, Board of Governors, Madam Perez. My name is Arnulfo Hernandez. I am appearing here today on behalf of the California American GI Forum. No, I'm not from Orange County. That's a shout out to Orange County, because I think they're great. I am from Sacramento, but again, with the local chapter. The American GI Forum is a congressionally chartered national veterans organization. Our veterans attend many community colleges in California. Our children attend community colleges in California. It's such that establishes our standing as stakeholders in this proposed change. As a lawyer, I have an observation, a legal observation, that may have legal implications. As a representative of the American GI Forum, I also have an observation that goes to the policy as it relates to the proposed change. The legal observation is in reality a legal argument that there is no statutory authorization for the proposed changes. I don't have these documents to give to you, but I will very briefly mention the sections that I am referring to. The section that you propose to change, 55003, is a regulation in the California Administrative Code. A regulation, by definition in Government Code Section 11342.600, means every rule, regulation, et cetera, adopted to implement or interpret or make specific the law that is enforced, administered by it, or to govern its procedure. That is, before you do anything to a regulation, you must have a statutory authority to do so. At the end of the proposed changes that you passed out, the following authority is provided: Education Code Section 66700, which is just general law, doesn't really pertain to what I'm about to articulate. 70901, which is not important for this discussion, and 70902A1, which basically establishes the community colleges by law. But what I wanted to point out in 70902A1 is that the governing body of each community college district shall maintain, establish, etc., colleges in accordance with the law. The next sentence: in doing so, the governing board may initiate any programs or activity, or may otherwise act, that is the change here, or may otherwise act in any manner that is not in conflict with or inconsistent with or preempted by any law, and that is not in conflict with the purposes for which community colleges districts are established. That refers to your mission and your vision. The most important section that applies here is 66010.4, which you have cited as your authority. It starts with a preamble of what your primary mission is. A1 states the primary mission. I want to focus on 66010.4, subsection A, 2.
Mr. Hernandez, I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Let me just conclude by saying that I don't believe you have the authority, statutory authority, to make these changes. As for my policy observation, you are cutting off access to individuals that have no place else to turn. Thank you.
I'm going to try this one. I think it's going to be wrong. Jeanette from Waldorf. Jeanette, pronounce your last name for me, please.
Sunny Patin.
Sunny Patin, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, or almost good afternoon. Chancellor Scott, members of the Board of Governors, and staff. My name is Jeanette Sunny. I'm the legislative staff attorney with the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. First, I would like to thank you, Chancellor Scott, and your vice chancellors for meeting with our representatives back in with MALDIF in November. As we discussed, we share similar concerns for improving the educational outcome of California's community college students. At our meeting in November, we requested statistical validation that supports the changes you are seeking on Title V because we believe that it is critical that the Board of Governors justify any changes to the prerequisite policy with statistical data demonstrating the need to reform the current prerequisite policies. Unfortunately, we have not received the information we requested, and as a result, we are unable to support the current changes under Title V. I will briefly elaborate our reasons in 4 main points. First is that the case has not been made that the changes are necessary. Although we understand that eliminating statistical validation would make it easier to implement prerequisites, there has been no proof that there would be no disparate impact on students of color or limited English proficient students. We have not seen data to demonstrate which courses require the prerequisite changes. 2, the language presented does not include adequate safeguards against disparate impacts. As we discussed, revisions to the prerequisite policy must include adequate safeguards, such as monitoring the impacts of policy revisions to ensure that no unintended consequences occur. We also believe that adequate monitoring must ensure that the policy changes are narrowly tailored and are not applied more broadly than necessary to achieve positive results. For example, in Section L2, even if there is a finding of a disparate impact, the regulations do not require that the prerequisite be eliminated. It only requires that the district develop and implement a plan to correct the disproportionate impact. And as a result, we feel the safeguards are weak and pretty much unenforceable. Given all the budget cuts we are facing in the next few years, there are also no safeguards to ensure that the prerequisite course will be available for students. The regulations do not provide with specificity what it means to be sufficiently available or reasonably available. Without defining these terms, there is no way to ensure that students will have appropriate access to these courses. And lastly, the changes to Title V must be done in a meaningful and true package of reform. We believe that it is critical that the prerequisite revisions are presented in a larger package of reforms or initiatives to improve, is that my time? No. To improve student success, increased access to counseling and provision of adequate remedies for students who are unable to satisfy the revised prerequisite standards are examples of other initiatives that must be included in a larger reform package. In closing, I would just like to state that MALDIF fully supports the need to ensure student success and improve student outcomes and welcomes the opportunity to sit down with you to ensure that the revised regulations have no less protections than the rigorous protections that currently exist in state and federal law, and that meaningful safeguards are in place so that there are no disparate impact of students. We must ensure that student success is not impeded by these policy changes. Thank you.
Ricardo Hanson, California Community College Independence. Or Richard. I just made you Ricardo.
I don't qualify as a Ricardo, although it is my name. Well, I'm not here for the Community College Independence. I'm here just as a faculty member. I've been to many of these meetings. I guess I've been serving in various capacities before this board for a little over 10 years. And I'm also a math instructor, so I'm one of those obstacles to a lot of students. But when I did come on board in the community colleges, originally that was in around 1990. And I guess that was around the time that there were really no prerequisites. You know, everything was off the board. There had been a lawsuit, all of that. And for a math, you know, everyone understands math is a pretty linear subject. So prerequisites make sense. There's a real sequential of knowledge, sequential building of knowledge. And so it makes a lot of sense that there are prerequisites in the math area. But back then, they were all kind of out the window, so there really were no prerequisites. It seemed a little bit incongruous. But over the years, things have happened that actually at this point, math departments, by and large, do enforce their prerequisites in the system. But my other area is history. I have a master's degree in history. I've taught some history. But, the problem is really the same. It's just not so clearly defined. And so my point is that there really is a problem that we're facing at this point. And I wanted to say something about the board. This board now is kind of on the crest of a wave that's been building over the time I've been here. Some of you may recall George Kaplan, who would speak here many times about how, and I think he used to use a history example, that we offer history classes to people who have reading problems and writing problems, and what good is that for the students? And he was a prime mover on where we are right now on the Basic Skills Initiative, among others. And so I'm just here to say that there is a problem, and the board needs to come to grips with it. And I want to echo some of the earlier comments that I believe the Academic Senate now has put a lot of work into this. It's not back to the old days. This is not a throwback to pre-1990. This is an opportunity to move forward, and I hope we'll be able to seize it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody who provided testimony and reinforce that this is a place where all views are considered, respected, and paid attention to. I'd also like to remind folks this is a first reading. We have a lot of information to consider as a board, and without further objection from my colleagues, Steve, did you want to say something? Without further objection from my colleagues, I would like to move on to our next item. Okay. Item 7.2, Title V Regulation Revisions for College Funding Formulas. Vice Chancellor Eric Skinner.
This next item before you is a first reading of a proposed regulatory change regarding our funding formula. It is a fairly straightforward issue and has gone through our consultative process without any controversy, so I think it's really more of a technical cleanup item. But essentially what this is within our funding model, there are provisions that guide the funding of new colleges and new centers that come online. Over the course of the last year, we've become aware of the inconsistencies in the way we funded those new centers and colleges, and the proposed regulation change before you would simply clarify that additional funding for new colleges and new centers would be provided in the year subsequent to the new college or center coming online. We vetted this proposal with the chief business officers, with the ACBO board. It's been through consultation council and has not attracted any controversy or opposition along the way. The major benefit of it is that it resolves inconsistency, and that it also provides a more kind of predictable planning process for both the Chancellor's office and for districts. Again, a first reading on this proposed change.
Member Baum.
Just a quick question. Is the only change the one that is highlighted on paragraph 11?
That's accurate. It's very, very small technical change.
Everything else has already been adopted in the Senate?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Very minor change.
Any other board member comments? Thank you very much. It is a first reading as well. Item 7.3, Title V Regulation Revisions to exclude one-time funds from the full-time faculty obligation. Vice Chancellor Skinner.
All right. Again, this is a first reading of a proposed regulatory change. It is considerably more complicated than the last. This change is it relates to the calculations for the full-time faculty obligation, and attempts to resolve some tensions and conflicts between that funding, that full-time faculty obligation mechanism and parcel taxes. And so let me walk you through it a little bit. This is really an issue that was brought to the fore upon the passage of the first community college parcel tax in state history, with San Mateo County voters approving a 4-year parcel tax a few months ago. I guess it was last June, so almost a year ago. The passage of the parcel tax raised an issue, and that essentially it's at the heart of the issue is the fact that parcel tax revenues are inherently temporary revenues. They are approved on a limited term by the voters, typically a 4-year span. I think they're sometimes as brief as 2 years, and I've seen measures at a 6-year interval. But bottom line is they're temporary revenues, and what the potential issue here is that the full-time faculty obligation mechanism has one narrow provision that is it causes a problem for local districts as they wrestle with how to use those parcel tax revenues. So let me step you through it. It is a bit technical, but again, I'd underscore it's actually, I think you'll agree after I walk through this that it's a very narrow issue that we're talking about. I think it helped to start with just a brief review of the full-time faculty obligation mechanism. This is the mechanism that the system uses to encourage districts to move towards having 75% of their courses taught by full-time faculty. Typically, the way that is enforced is there's a number of full-time faculty that a district is required to employ, and then as a district experiences increases in their funded credit FTS, so as their funded enrollments grow, that number of full-time faculty they have to employ also increases. It ratchets up with the growth in students, and so that is how the faculty obligation mechanism works in most of the time. And in that instance, there's really no interplay between these parcel tax revenues and the full-time faculty obligation. And that's because the funded credit FTS, the funded enrollments, those are state dollars, those are ongoing dollars. And so the parcel tax revenues don't even mix, don't even have any impact at all on driving that faculty obligation number. The instance in which there's some tension it's a specific instance in which, and unfortunately we're pretty familiar with it because you've been living with us for the last couple of years, in years in which the Board of Governors determines that there are not sufficient resources in the budget to support an increase in the FON, in the faculty obligation number. In those years, a district has the option of meeting their faculty obligation by simply maintaining the same percentage of full-time faculty as they had in the prior fall. So in that instance, the faculty obligation number itself, a district does not have to comply with that as long as they're adhering to and continuing to employ the same percentage of full-time faculty they had in the prior year. And here's where the problem is. And forgive me, this is a somewhat technical issue, but it's just the nature of it. I'm trying to make it as straightforward as I can. The problem is that if a district uses parcel tax revenues, which are temporary revenues, if they use those to hire part-time faculty, as many districts would very likely want to do, so as not to incur an ongoing obligation with those parcel tax revenues. If a district were to do that, it would drive their part-time faculty percentage up. And so in these years of insufficient resources where the board rules there are insufficient resources, a district would be disadvantaged if they had used these parcel tax revenues to hire part-time faculty. And so that is the issue that's before you. And again, it was brought forward when San Mateo successfully passed a parcel tax measure. San Mateo brought the issue forward to the ACBO board. It's been discussed there. This issue has been discussed at consultation council meetings. I would say the ACBO board was in support. They felt that it made sense to, in effect, ensure that passing a parcel tax and using those monies for part-time faculty should not disadvantage a district in the faculty obligation number. So they see it as a technical issue, as a cleanup issue, and furthermore as an issue that if we're going to encourage more of our districts to pursue parcel taxes, it's important that we remove those kind of built-in disadvantages. ACBO board also has a strong feeling that one-time revenues that should, prudence dictates that they should be used for one-time purposes. And so I think that's another reason ACBO had some sympathy towards this policy change. When the issue was brought forward through consultation council, it attracted significant opposition from faculty groups. As you can imagine, there was a kind of a dividing line on this issue between management and faculty, or administration and faculty, and so I don't want to underscore or underrepresent that. There was considerable controversy as it moved through the consultation council process. And so, that's the issue before you. It's a first reading of the issue. I acknowledge it's a very technical issue. I did my best to present it, but there may very well be questions. Again, at its heart, the issue is that parcel tax revenues are one-time. They're limited-term resources by nature, and therefore, anything in our funding model that, really, the goal in this proposed change is to allow districts to use those monies in one-time ways without disadvantaging themselves or putting their district in a precarious position.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Board member comments, we do have several speakers as well. Member Thomas, did you want to say something before our public comment?
Clarification question, if I might. I understood what you were saying about the one-time type use, but is there any other kinds of limitations on parcel tax use versus bond measure use? I'm having a little trouble understanding quite the difference, other than parcel tax. It sounded like it was 4 or 6 years versus bond measure, which tends to be a bit longer.
By and large, parcel taxes are designed for operational purposes versus bond dollars going to capital outlay. But really, the terms of the parcel tax revenues use is defined in the ballot measure. That's the covenant with the voters saying we'd like additional money. That's the district stepping forward saying we need some additional investment, and here's how it would be used. And really, that parcel tax measure that goes on the ballot can define whether they're going to buy computers or hire, add course sections or hire counselors or expand career technical education programs. Once it's specified in the ballot that way, that's the binding covenant between the district and the voters.
Thank you.
Member McDougall.
Vice Chancellor Skinner, could we get some idea of the scope of the utilization of the parcel tax? Is it something that 75% of the districts use? Is it something that 20%? What are we talking about here in terms of the magnitude of its application?
The magnitude is one district in the history of our system has successfully passed a parcel tax. And so it's one district, San Mateo, last June. Since then, another district's measure went down in failure. It was
Foothill de Anza.
Thank you, Chancellor. Foothill de Anza. So it is, again, that I think that further speaks to the narrow application here, that it doesn't affect many districts, but I do think that to the extent that districts begin to look at other funding options as the state pulls back and divests, local districts are going to be looking at a number of other funding mechanisms, including parcel taxes, including business, including, you know, in-kind donations, et cetera. And this proposed regulatory change is intended to make the parcel tax a little bit of an easier fit for the community college districts as they figure out how to seek and utilize those resources.
Okay, Vice President Perez, I think we have some speakers.
Dennis Frisch with the faculty.
FAC.
Oh, FAC, with FAC.
Good, I guess it's morning. Yes, good morning to board members and to Chancellor Scott. I'm Dennis Frisch. I'm the president-elect of FAC, and I come here to offer a couple of observations on the proposed language changes. The FAC board is concerned about this change and is basically of the opinion that it's probably not a desirable change. First of all, our concerns center on the faculty, and we're concerned that excluding monies from parcel tax would in fact encourage the use of part-time faculty, and it would further aggravate an already embarrassing situation that we face where the percentages of our courses taught by full-time faculty have been declining. And that this has the potential to aggravate that problem even more. This has implications for student success, which in the course of this board meeting we've heard a great deal about, because there is already ample evidence to indicate that students have a greater chance of success in courses if they have access to their professors. And part-time faculty, by the very nature of their employment, cannot always provide that kind of access when the students need it. Full-time faculty are on campus more, oftentimes at times when students can meet with them, even though it might be outside of designated office hours, and that's still, they are there, they are accessible to the students. We're concerned that this particular language change would aggravate the ratio between full and part-time faculty. On that basis, we would urge perhaps that you not consider this this change. There is another aspect to all of this, however. In addition to what happened in the De Anza Foothill district recently, there was a K through 12 district that tried a parcel tax back in, I think it was June, and that was in Santa Monica, and it too failed. There have perhaps been three, or maybe I'm aware of at least three efforts to pass parcel taxes. Two of them failed. And it might be that we want to consider that the electorate has a bit more nuanced approach to this, and even though they support education, they are not always willing to approve these kinds of approaches to funding education, partly perhaps because they perceive that it's an unstable form of funding, and education requires stability and continuity. Our students succeed because there is a predictable curriculum, there is access to professors and things like that. This kind of funding approach, it seems to me, encourages less stability and less continuity. And on that basis, perhaps, is a less desirable approach, and this language change should perhaps not be approved.
Thank you. Carl Freelander, Community College Council.
Thank you, Vice President Perez. First, I want to just begin by acknowledging that I think faculty and management would all agree that the current rules around full-time obligation numbers and 75-25 are very flawed. There's lots of problems, and there are many issues with them, and they have not served to help the system make the progress that it was supposed to make towards expanding the core of full-time faculty. That said, flawed as it is, we guard it jealously because it's really all we have to protect the core that exists. And I just would say that the request from the San Mateo district about this is not a critical request. The San Mateo district and any other district that passes a parcel tax can comply with its obligation by just maintaining its full-time obligation number. That's all that's necessary. So the change in regulation, all that does is allow them to continue using the alternative method, which didn't even exist until a few years ago, of improving the full-time, part-time ratio in difficult times by generally reducing the number of part-time faculty in the district, and now using parcel taxes to continue to hire part-time faculty, expand that section of the faculty, and have that excluded from the ratio. But it's not necessary. They could just meet the obligation, hire as many part-time faculty as they want with parcel tax money, and it wouldn't even be an issue. So I think that the need for this new modification of a recent change to a regulation that has existed since since AB 1725 is really uncalled for and raises the hackles of those of us who are very concerned about the system's failure to maintain and grow its full-time faculty core, and I would urge the board not to support this additional modification. Thank you.
Kathy Blackwood, San Mateo County Community College District.
Good morning. I'm the district's chief financial officer, and San Mateo is indeed the district in question here. As Vice Chancellor Skinner has pointed out, California is in pretty dire straits in terms of our budget, and community colleges follow along with that. Our district has tried over the last several years of extremely difficult budget times to handle our budget by not replacing the faculty who retire rather than laying off employees. We have not laid anybody off. We've managed our budget. We've shrunk. We've maintained our percentage ratio by maintaining both the part-time and the full-time ratios. In this very narrow instance, when the Board of Governors has said there are not sufficient resources to require us to increase our faculty, that there are not enough monies to help us serve the students the way we would like to, in this very narrow instance, San Mateo is being penalized by having to hire more full-time faculty out of one-time dollars. Now, in the fall of 2009, we had 14,000 students in wait slots at our district, and it would have been more, except that we cap our wait list so as to not unreasonably raise expectations that students are going to get into a class. Our local board of trustees said this is not acceptable. Let's go to our voters and see what they say. And our local voters said yes, and they passed Measure G and said yes, we will pay for you to add more classes. And that was the primary point of the parcel tax, was that we add additional classes for our students. To now have a regulation that would say, oh, by the way, you have to add full-timers on this one-time money in order to address, and again, it's only a short period of time, the economy will eventually turn around, we will go back to hiring. It's just during this period of time, but to say that I have to now make ongoing commitments on four-year money is not appropriate. And so I would really encourage you to look at this regulation and all regulations that limit the ability of our local board to use our local funds and instead work towards giving us local control. Thank you.
Richard Hanson, California Community College. I believe he's representing himself.
Better known as Ricardo.
I almost said Ricardo.
Well, my wife would appreciate that. Well, I am here representing my group this time, and it is a faculty issue, and it could be seen that we're just pursuing our own self-interest. But the 75% goal is something that's codified in AB 1725. And we did change the regulations, as Carl Friedlander said, back in, I think it was 2003-04, when we faced a very troubled year. That was the year of, we started off kind of like we did a couple of years ago, knowing there was trouble down the road, and there's a lot of discussion about the full-time number, and we did come up with this option of the percentage. And we thought that was a good compromise to give districts some additional flexibility. But now, this now takes it to a new height. And I might just comment a little bit on the idea of one-time money. Usually we think of one-time money in terms of its uncertainty, because the state may take that one-time money away. It may be here one year, gone the next. Back to the question raised earlier about the nature of this money, it's more like a grant money. The grants are usually for a period of time. You know how much time you've got. You judge accordingly what to do with that money. You know the dates at which you'd have to reapply for the grant, and in this case, you'd have to go to the voters to get your grant reaffirmed. So this is something that districts could plan for, and it isn't a matter of using that money to hire an ongoing faculty member. It's about advantaging the use of your money for the part-time side and keeping your percentage. You should, if you have the option, and I think that's a fair option and a good way to be flexible. But this is really stepping over the bounds. You can keep your full-time numbers. You can let your percentage, keep your percentage. All of this was based upon money that is ongoing coming from the state. There's really no accountability on that money, how it gets used. I think this would be fraught with abuse if we pass this. That the colleges could, or the districts could just shift money toward part-time instruction and expect an exemption because they could say we're using parcel tax money. So I'd ask you to consider that. If you were to go this route, include something that would mandate accountability in the form of the districts offering sections beyond the state-funded level. Thanks very much.
Chancellor Scott would like to say something.
Well, one of the speakers commented that they felt that a parcel tax was not a very good way to gain money, and I think all of us would like to see more state money and not a desperate kind of thing of getting more parcel tax. I can assure you that there's not going to be many community college districts that are going to be successful at passing a parcel tax, because a parcel tax has to be passed with 2/3 vote. And San Mateo passed it with just a few hundred votes more than they needed for 2/3. So this is not something that is going to be characteristic of 72 districts in the state. So I want to make that very clear. Now, when I was in the legislature, I voted to reduce the percentage from 67% to 55%, like our bond measures. But we can't get that out of the legislature, and I won't go into details of why we can't, but the no tax pledge sort of blocks that ever being passed. So this is not going to be widespread in community colleges. So I want that understood. Now, my understanding was that there was a pledge that the San Mateo district had made that they were planning to use this for more sections, which, would be a good way to use it. And why would they want to have those sections taught by part-timers? Well, I guess the answer is obvious. They can offer more sections that way. For one reason is they can offer more sections because part-timers are paid on a per hour basis. Plus, as one who was a former college president, one of the reasons that you hire part-timers sometimes instead of full-timers is that you're not sure that you want to put that person on a tenure track. It's not just the money, it's the tenure situation. I know we had some vocational programs sometime that we had a pretty good demand for, but we wanted to make sure before we ever hired somebody and tenured them that that vocational program would continue. Because, if you hire say, a sociology instructor, you can also use that person perhaps to teach psychology or something else. But you hire somebody in auto mechanics, they're not terribly well prepared to teach English or some of your other subjects. And if suddenly your program in auto mechanics were to dip, you have somebody hired that does represent a problem. So maybe Vice Chancellor Skinner can clarify this a little, but my understanding was that there was some kind of pledge involving opening sections. So I don't know what the board wants to do on this, but I want to assure you that, number one, this is not something that is going to happen all over the state of California. Frankly, I wish it would happen all over the state of California, because I'd love to see our community college districts get more money. You know, somebody got up here and said about our last discussion, we're hurting come one, come all. You know what's hurting come one, come all? Is a lack of resources from the state of California.
Yeah.
That's what's hurting come one, come all. Why did we turn away 140,000 students? Because we took an 8% cut 2 years ago. Why will we turn away students today? We will have to turn them away in our next area, because the state of California is going to cut us $400,000. That's the real problem. If you want to know what the real problem is, I wish we had more partial taxes, because, you know, we're just looking everywhere for money, because the state's not giving us sufficient money to do our job. But maybe Vice Chancellor Skinner can address that issue about opening more sections.
Eric, if you can make it brief.
Absolutely, very brief. And yes, the San Mateo did highlight that in their ballot measure to the local voters, that the core sections would be added. So you're right on target with your comments there. And the last thing I note is our final speaker, Rich Hanson, raised some points about the accountability, and I think that there are valid points in terms of how would we assess, you know, the regulatory change specifies that faculty hired with partial tax revenues would not be counted in the calculation. And in order to make that workable, yes, districts would have to tell us how they use those partial tax revenues. You know, we're not going to just make an assumption that every partial tax dollar should be an offset in their full-time faculty obligation number. They're actually going to have to demonstrate to us that that's where the money went, was for faculty. And so there is an accounting measure that we would use to operationalize this. And I think, again, Mr. Hanson's point was valid.
Okay, I'm going to ask, unless we have some real burning questions here, since this is a first reading, if board members are okay with moving on.